Hey, Kyle, you remember when you told me we were going to watch a fun, spooky, cozy little horror documentary this week?
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck you, man. This is depressing as shit.
All right. Maybe that's good enough.
Maybe that's good enough.
All right.
Fuck you, man. Welcome back to Jake and Kyle's Spooky Good Time. We are your hosts, Jake,
Kyle.
and we're here today to talk about Cropsey, the documentary horror film from 2009. Little synopsis for you. Barbara Brancaccio and Joshua Zaman draw connections between the urban legends they heard as children growing up and the real-life child killer Andre Rand, operating in their sleepy Staten Island neighborhood throughout their childhood.
And what kind of film is it?
What kind of film is it? You wanna
That's
tell me
the
that?
part I missed.
Oh, my paper just says it's a story.
I
of-
know. That's why you were supposed to do it, because you came up with something.
Oh, I'm supposed to come up with something.
You said you had something.
Oh, I thought I was just going to say it.
No.
Oh, okay. I got it. I got something.
Okay. Rewind.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today, Jake?
The documentary horror film Cropsey, which is, here's a synopsis for you. Barbara Brancaccio and Joshua Zaman draw connections between the urban legends they heard as children growing up and the real-life child killer Andre Rand, operating in their sleepy Staten Island neighborhood throughout their childhood. It's a story of fact and fiction blurring the lines of folktale and reality.
I saw this movie over a decade ago.
This is my first time watching this movie. Like some of
I
these
totally
movies.
forgot it, but it made me think of being a teenager and exploring abandoned buildings in the woods.
Yes, that is true.
I think every teenage boy and maybe many teenage girls do the same thing.
Yeah, I think just teenagers. I actually remember. So in my small town, it's not so small, but small for Covina, or Covina is small for California in California comparison, but not small in comparison of Midwest towns. But I grew up in Covina, California, for reference. Maybe I shouldn't tell
Is
people
that what's your social security number?
I know, maybe I shouldn't tell people that. Okay. Yes, I think teenagers of all kind can relate to the idea of abandoned buildings and like wanting to go to spooky places and stuff like that. I know in my small town here in Southern California, where when I was in high school, my friends and I, we did some pretty stupid shit. Went to some not really did stupid things, but just went stupid places we probably shouldn't have been, where there was probably like a lot of, drifters and, kind of shady people like that. In my small town, there's actually like a city over an abandoned asylum that we went to one time. And we swore we saw like what looked like someone's arm on the ground, but
God.
not attached to a body. I don't know if maybe it was like a old Halloween decoration. Maybe it wasn't. Who knows? But there's that. And then there's also this tale. There's this thing called Zelda's Tunnel. And so is this idea it came about because in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the city was founded, there was a cult, I guess, that, dug their roots in their foundation into the town. And, allegedly, there was some human sacrifice going on, and allegedly there was this young woman who was sacrificed by a cult to who knows what, devil, demon, god. And now that tunnel still exists. It's like a waterway, and people like to go walk down the tunnel all the way to the end, and allegedly you'll see her or you'll hear her, like, telling you to go back and run away. And so, I like this documentary because I feel like all of us, no matter where you're from, have some sort of weird, creepy, spooky, folklore legend, local legend to talk about, and, something that you spook people with. I remember my dad also, here's another story. I remember my dad telling me the thing to do in his town was there was this old Aerojet factory, which was an old government facility in the hills of like Chino Hills area. And my dad told me that it was kind of the thing to do, where it's like you and your buddy, if like you were talking to like a girl, you would take the girls on this drive through the windy hills to the top of the hill where the Aerojet facility is, and allegedly the ground would like ooze this green fog and everything like that. And I guess there's actually
I'm sure that was safe to breathe.
I guess there's some truth to it, because there was actually like a number of cancer cases in the area, that like a huge spike of cancer cases in like the 80s.
Was it a Superfund site?
It was the weapons testing facility is what it was. So I guess when the government shut it down, they left all of the radioactive and like toxic materials there, which is
sounds like what was happening in Body Snatchers.
Seriously. No, but seriously, but they left everything there. They didn't do a proper remediation, effort. And what happened is
that sounds like a U.S. government I know.
Yep, but
now we're on a list.
We're on a list now.
But we're on a list together.
We weren't on one before. We're on one now. But yeah, so I mean, of course, the local legend says there's some supernatural quality to the green fog oozing out of the ground, but most likely it was probably just toxic waste that was giving a weird quality to the fog there. But my dad said you would take, you'd take what girl you were going out with all the way up there, and, you'd just take another friend with you, and the other friend would spook the shit out of the girl, pretty much. And so that was the thing
Sounds
they
like
did.
your dad's quite romantic.
He's an interesting guy. He's an interesting guy. Shout out to Dad. But yeah, I feel like every town, every city has their own local legend, right? And so that's where Cropsey is really interesting, because it blends that sort of urban legend, the local legend, and the idea of that with real life tragedy in a really interesting way. And I mean, I don't want to spoil where we're going next. I mean, this is not a spoiler-free review, remember, and talk. But it's an urban legend that's attached to some pretty disturbing real life facts and like things that happened in their town in Staten Island.
Before we get too dark and too bleak, shall we have a drink?
Yes. Maybe that'll help lighten
the mood.
Lighten the mood a little bit. Tell us, Kyle, what is this drink that you made for us this week?
This is the Killer Queen.
Killer Queen. Nice.
This is by Robin Wolf at the Hatch Rotisserie and Bar.
Robin knows what's up. Cheers.
It's a martini.
Nice. It's a gin martini, huh?
It's a gin martini.
I taste that
the
gin
only
in there.
kind of martini.
Is it? I thought, wait.
I don't recognize vodka martinis.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, don't they make vodka martinis? You made me go feel like I was insane there for a second.
Why would you drink a vodka martini? You drink a martini
maybe I'm James
to
Bond.
appreciate. Well, the Vesper had gin in it.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I'm a
It
fucking...
had vodka
I'm an
and
idiot.
gin, but you drink a martini to appreciate the taste of the gin. What are you appreciating in a vodka martini?
Acetone potato liquor.
Look, there's good vodka, but, I don't know.
I like this. I like the lemon twist, the little citrusy, rosy, florally. I like
This
that.
is made with Lillet Blanc that has been infused with rose petals.
That's so good. I really like it. I could taste the floral. I can smell it. It smells like I'm walking through a rose garden, and
Yes.
you squeeze a lemon into my face in the most pleasant way possible.
Yes.
And then just give me like a shot of gin, all those juniper berries hitting my palate with the lemon and the rose. It's good. I like
It's
it.
very floral.
It is very floral. I like it though.
I like it. If you don't like floral liquor, you're not going to want this.
If you're a man like me, you're not used to this floral liquor.
Yes.
But give it a shot. Give it a shot. It's good.
I like
this.
it.
I like it a lot.
It's nice.
Good job.
It's got
Props to you and Robin.
yes, it has a vaguely horror themed name. So,
Soleil, Killer Queen, Soleil.
all right.
I just thought you would like that.
I didn't. So, Cropsey is apparently this urban legend that's
Yeah.
been going on in New York
Yes.
since maybe the 70s, 60s, 70s. It was actually the inspiration for the film The Burning. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I've heard of that though.
I have not had a chance to see it. Maybe it's something we'll have to explore in a future episode.
Yeah.
But It actually stars George Costanza, Jason Alexander.
Very interesting.
I think he's a camp counselor in it.
Yeah. When did this movie come out?
81, I think.
Oh, okay.
It was like at the beginning of that killer camp phase that started with Friday the 13th.
Yeah. You know what? There's another a horror movie I watched before that this kind of reminded me of. I can't remember if it's called The Summer of '84 or '87. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I don't know.
I can't remember if it's called The Summer of '84 or '87, but it's one of those. It's an interesting.
Sounds familiar.
It's about like children going missing and like a supposed serial killer and stuff like that. So I wonder if that was inspired by this, especially because like what I saw in Cropsey was like the sort of like, I think this is kind of like where it popularized kind of like the missing persons pictures on the milk cartons.
Yes.
And stuff like that.
It was really interesting, especially because as someone not from Staten Island, you think Staten Island, it's one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. It's a city, right?
Yeah.
But no, this, especially at the time, was countryside.
Mm-hmm.
Rural, remote.
Lots of wooded areas.
Not much happening. A slow, quiet area to grow up in.
Yeah.
And the directors of this film grew up under the shadow of the abandoned Willowbrook State School.
Yeah.
So what was the Willowbrook State School?
What was it again? Wait, what was that? How about I ask you?
Okay, you ask me.
Yes, the Willowbrook State School. What was the Willowbrook State School, Scott? Kyle. Let me do it again. Yes, the Willowbrook State School. What was the Willowbrook State School, Kyle?
Well, that was where the government locked away children and adults with developmental and mental disorders. And there was actually an expose done about this school, about this institute, by a young Gerardo Rivera, where he took a camera crew in there. And we saw a little bit of that in the Cropsey documentary. How would you describe what we saw in that?
It was very upsetting.
Upsetting.
It's very upsetting. As someone like who has a loved one with special needs, it's even more upsetting, because you see how they used to be treated. And it's really like, if you look at like the timeline, it's not that long ago in our history. And so it's really disgusting how like a lot of people with special needs and with mental disabilities were treated by those government facilities. And so it was
nightmarish.
It was nightmarish. It was upsetting to watch. It was really upsetting.
Overstating things.
Not
it
at
really
all.
Is. That that is easily the most disturbing thing in the film is watching those clips from that.
I remember
just the state of that they were in.
Yeah, I remember when that scene came up, I just kind of like froze and like felt wrong. Like I got like pins and needles in my head, feeling like
how could we treat human beings like that?
It was both like I felt like just like completely disgusted and frightened and just
half
like
naked
shocked.
in the dark, covered in feces, just left unattended.
Yeah.
In
really
some
upsetting.
stupor from, who knows what cocktail of drugs or whatever. Very, very heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And you get a sense that this negative energy kind of hung over this abandoned building. And I think that the ancillary knowledge of what happened there maybe trickled down into the community and passed from the adults to their children when these kids came up with this urban legend of a killer named Cropsey that was living in this ruin.
Whether you're someone who believes in the paranormal or the supernatural or not, I feel like when it comes to like a building like that, when you just know what happened there, it holds a weight in you, like in your chest, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And it just feels like I actually have a personal experience, and by by the time I've mentioned all these urban legends or local stories, someone could probably pinpoint where I grew up. But I don't know if you ever heard about this, but in my town where I grew up with my mom, there was one Christmas Eve, a Christmas slaughter that happened, essentially. I don't remember what they referred to it as, but or massacre, the Christmas massacre. I don't know what they refer to it as, but essentially this guy who was getting divorced from his wife showed up to her family home, and their kids were there or something like that, and he pretty much murdered most everyone in the house, and he came in with a flamethrower and like burnt the whole house down. Anyways, really messed up. Well, one time I was on a walk with a friend of mine, and her and I passed by that house, and I didn't know it was that house, but I just looked at it, and it still had like burned wood on the sides, and it was years later after it even happened, but had burned wood on the side and all this different stuff. And I just looked at it, and I felt like a heaviness in my chest and in my breathing, just like, you know, regardless, like I said, if you believe in like some sort of supernatural or spiritual energy still existing in some place where something that tragic happens or not, it's just like it's an indescribable feeling of just like a serious somber sadness, because like I didn't even know what house it was, but I just looked at it and I was like, I'm getting such a horribly sad feeling. Like I got the chills and like such a sad feeling from the house, and I could just tell by the looks of it something horrible happened there. And then I told my friend that, and she was just like, yeah, that's where the Christmas massacre happened. And I like instantly got the chills, even like 10 times as much as I did before when she mentioned that, because I was literally within like 10 feet away from like the front door, essentially, like looking at that place when she told me that. And I was just like, this place holds a weight that like I can't explain. I'd never felt that before, and I've never felt that since, where I felt, you know, actually there's one place I felt that since. I've visited the Whaley House in San Diego before, which is a very infamous haunted house, but even more so the Christmas Massacre house where all that happened. I've never felt such a weight in my chest before in my entire life. And so I can only imagine that's what inspired Barbara and Joshua to make this film, was the fact that they probably had that same weight, you know, some sort of similar feel of that weight inside them that, like, you know, drew them to that urban legend or that local tragedy, you know.
I do think that if it's supernatural, or if it's maybe, I don't know if it's supernatural or that humans are just more perceptive than we give ourselves credit for.
Strong intuitions.
Strong intuition. I had a strange experience happen to me, which is when I was younger, went to go visit my grandfather. And when I left, something told me, I heard myself, my voice, my inner monologue tell me, you're not going to see him again. And then he passed away later that night.
Wow.
But there wasn't anything that had changed about him.
Yeah.
He had been, you know, he wasn't doing well, but he had been pretty much the same for almost a year at that point.
Yeah.
So there was nothing out of the ordinary to tell me that.
But it's just your intuition.
Something told me that. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but something told me that.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I mean, some people, I mean, I don't know if it's a spiritual thing or just a subconscious recognition, right? Some people say the intuition is just our subconscious mind work.
I have terrible intuition, so I don't think it was that, but it could have been.
Maybe, but they do say that intuition is our subconscious, because our subconscious mind works like pretty much like 10 times faster than our conscious mind. It's our subconscious mind picking up on things that our conscious mind can't even comprehend, like think about, you know, consciously. Or it could be a spiritual thing, or maybe it's a mixture of the two. Maybe the subconscious and the spiritual are mixed, Kyle. I don't know. I can't give the people an answer on this.
They demand an answer.
But it's just my theory. Maybe it's a mixture of the two. I don't know, man. I don't know. But that's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy, and that's weird to feel. But yeah, I get those feelings sometimes too. So I know what you're alluding to, what you're saying. So yeah.
And I feel, and it was interesting. There was something in this film that reminded me of that, which was the woman who discovered the body of the missing girl.
Yeah.
You know, she had this intuition to look at a certain location, even though it had been canvas, even though it had been looked over multiple times, and something drew her to that location. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I know, like, some people speculated, I know in the documentary it speculates like maybe a second person was involved or something, because it might seem that like the girl's body wasn't originally put there but moved there. So I don't know, like,
I mean, people look for conspiracy.
That's
when
true.
A lot of times it's just human error, or I think that, but it's an interesting concept. I think that the thing that this film obviously, it dives into a very tragic and very real episode that happened to this small Staten Island community, but it also poses this interesting question about the way that urban legends form as an explanation for the wickedness of real people.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's like I feel like we can't comprehend the type of evil that can exist in a person, and so it's like, it's crazy how it's like, to the mind it's easier to create like an urban legend, or create some sort of like, you know, implement or like enforce some sort of supernatural quality to the story, because it's almost impossible to comprehend that like a human being would just naturally do something like that of their own free will, you know. It's a horrifying thought. And you know, this film, it's certainly not the first one of its kind to do something like this, but I feel like it obviously inspired a lot of like YouTubers that exist nowadays. Because I don't know about you, but I watch a lot of like horror YouTube documentary type stuff, or just based on like real stuff. Like, I'll give a couple like a shout out to Nexpo. I love his channel. I love his stuff.
Nexpo, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I've shown you him or if you know
I
about
liked
him.
the documentary on Loeb.
Yes, the one on Loeb. That's right, I sent you that one.
Maybe we'll talk about Loeb later.
Yeah, and we can talk about Loeb in a future episode for sure. But he does something very similar, in my opinion, which is like, you know, this like sort of horror documentary, just sort of this macabre. And
there's also one that I like called Horses.
Horses? Which one's that?
That's the one I told you. It's like how to eat a human and how to perform an exorcism.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and this also somewhat adjacently reminds me of the Lore podcast, which I know of.
Yes, Lore.
Especially because like Lore is that podcast, the whole point of it is like relating lore and like urban legend and folk tales to the real historical facts, right? And it, you know, Aaron Mahnke, the creator of that show, he does such a good job of mixing both like the folklore aspect of it with the fact aspect, where at the end of it, he kind of just lets you decide what to believe and what not to believe, right? And I wonder if he's seen this movie, because if his mixture of like fact and fiction feels very similar to Cropsey in the way that it's sort of,
I love that guy's delivery.
I love it too. He has such a great,
it's so on point.
He is, like, you could tell that guy's probably a perfectionist.
I
like,
think so.
He
definitely.
that guy works hard. That guy works really hard, because his stories are always perfectly written, in my opinion. So yeah, I love that guy. Love that guy's stuff.
Have you seen Candyman?
Yes, I have seen Candyman.
That was something that also came to mind for me, was how these urban legends about Candyman came out of this tragic story that is at the center of that film.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting. There in the film Candyman, they discuss people sneaking in through apartments by going between the gaps of medicine cabinets, and apparently that actually happened at some point. Somebody was murdered by people who snuck in through the hole in a medicine cabinet. Yeah,
that's fucking crazy.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's interesting though. Yeah,
Candyman. I love that movie.
I think, you know what's funny, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm so desensitized to horror at this point, you know, after so much, the amount of horror media and like movies and television shows that I've intaken. But if there's anything that still gets me, it's an urban legend, because And I think it's because, like, just going back to this point of the blending of the fact and fiction, it's unsettling because there's just the reason why, like, you know, like we talked about before, the reason why we blend fact and fiction in the first place is because it's almost incomprehensible, you know, some of the things that human beings can do to other human beings. It's like, it's hard to fathom that we have to blend fact with fiction in order to cope, you know, with the tragedy. And so,
and also how these stories are adapted, to fit whatever our society needs. One thing that was interesting in Candyman was how the Candyman myth changes when it's in Cabrini Green, I believe is the name of the projects there, and the white suburb, how it morphs and changes based on who's telling it, what the context is.
Yeah, you know, it's actually funny. It reminded me of a episode of Supernatural, the TV show Supernatural.
Supernatural, yeah.
There's an episode where there's like, I'm trying to remember, I think it's like, there's like some urban legend about a house, like this like house in the middle of the woods. And essentially like almost none of it's true, but the people the kids went in there and put up these symbols, like painted these symbols, and like they wanted to take video or I can't remember if they wanted to just scare one another or something like that. And they used the symbols to like scare one another, but then the symbols ended up bringing to life the urban legend that wasn't even true. Like and so it created a ghost out of nothing, essentially. I liked that episode because in every episode of Supernatural, there's like the ghost is connected and real, right? Sure. But in this episode, the urban legend and these ghosts were not real people. It was birthed out of their belief in them.
That's interesting.
Which is actually, it's a fun episode. It's a good episode. I think it's in the first season or something like that, but you should watch it. But yeah, it's just interesting.
Maybe we should do a follow-up episode about urban films with urban legends.
We could do a whole series on this.
Candyland.
We could do Candyland.
Candyland. Welcome to Candyland.
Candyland, my favorite urban legend.
Django Unchained tie-in. We could do Candyman. We could do. Have you seen Urban Legends?
Yes, I have.
We could do that. That's a fun little slasher movie.
We should. But yeah, so man, I mean, I want to talk more about Cropsey, but this idea of urban legends is so interesting, and so I think this is what Barbara and Joshua wanted. I feel like they wanted us to relate our own personal urban legends to their story the way the way they did.
Do you think Andre Rand did it?
I think he was a really weird dude. Maybe, socially just messed up, maybe mentally messed up in certain ways. He was indicted for, child molestation or assault, sexual assault. I mean, I could see him doing it, obviously, but at the same time, the way that Cropsey, the film, depicts it, it kind of leaves it in this uncomfortable place where maybe
there's some ambiguity there.
There's some ambiguity, like he might have just been a scapegoat.
I think that's something important to emphasize when we're talking about this is we don't know shit about this case. Idea. Except from the context of this film.
Yeah,
so,
I don't know any of the details.
It might be a lot less ambiguous in reality.
Especially to the people.
We're just going off of this.
Especially to the families who lost people. I mean, I can't even imagine dedicating years of your life to finding the truth.
Going off of this film though, he is not innocent. I don't know if he was guilty though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. No, he was he's not a good person.
Yeah.
He's a very disturbed. I mean, I don't want to become too moralistic and say he was an evil person. I don't think anyone's evil. I just think people are deeply flawed and oftentimes very disturbed like Andre. And
they can do evil things.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think Andre was a very disturbed man, and I don't know where that disturbance came from. I'm not a professional. I can't speak on that, but I could see him doing that. And so in that sense, like you said, he's not innocent, but was he guilty of this crime? Well, this film kind of leaves it on an ambiguous note where it
felt like he was put away on shaky evidence, but
yeah,
that's this is a 90-minute documentary.
I don't know.
You know, we haven't looked at the case.
It is interesting.
But he definitely seems like probably
it is interesting.
Definitely a danger to society, you know.
Yes, absolutely. But it is interesting of thinking or wondering, was this, ultimately putting Andre away, was it true justice for the crimes, or was he
a scapegoat because he's a creep?
Was he a scapegoat because he's a creep? And was he a scapegoat, I think more importantly, was he a scapegoat because this community had lost so many young children that they needed like an emotional catharsis on there. Catharsis. Yeah. Like they needed an emotional catharsis. Like they needed someone to pin it on so that they could feel some sort of closure, which I understand. Like I can't imagine like losing your own child or losing a family member, right? Losing a sibling and having them go missing. And it's like, I think they mention it in the documentary. It's like, you just, I think like one of the siblings says, just tell us where the body is. That's all I want to know.
Yeah.
Just tell us where the body is. And like they mentioned in the documentary that a child that goes missing is never truly dead until the body shows up.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's like, logically, you must think like, oh, they have to be dead. It does not matter. It's like in your mind, there's always that like piece of your brain that's like, they're still alive. They're still out there somewhere suffering, like trying to get back to us. That has to be
unimaginable, really. That kind of pain.
I'm getting the chills just thinking about it. It's like such a haunting thought. It's such a sad, haunting thought. Imagining like, that would consume me too. Just the idea of like a loved one being out there. Yeah. Even if they've been dead for years, but I don't know it. It's like there's no closure.
I hope that, I feel that
I had to finish my drink because I'm so sad right now. I want to cry.
He probably did it. Yeah,
he probably did. He
probably did it.
He seemed a bit like a narcissist too, and like he was just toying with people.
Exactly, and
that's another interesting part. The way he was toying with the media and with even the makers of this film. Would society
be better off with him out there? I don't think so. He was obviously a disturbed individual, but it's a documentary that I think posits a lot of interesting questions about the way that we deal with horrible things that affect us.
Real life tragedy,
and how that over time becomes urban legend, myth.
We fill in the gap, with what we don't understand. We fill in the gaps with urban legend, with the supernatural.
Somehow it makes it easier to process.
It does. I can see how it does. I can imagine it's easier. I don't know. I can imagine it's easier to believe in an urban legend or believe in some supernatural quality. Like, I think even like the friends of this guy, Andre, or I don't know if they're friends, but people who knew him said that, like,
I think they were subtitled as acquaintances.
Yeah, they said maybe they didn't want to be considered friends of him, although maybe they were. But I remember one of the guys said he was possessed by a demon. Like he was possessed by something.
Oh, that was the preacher who was housing him.
Yeah,
but he was housing him.
That's right.
He said he was housing him because he was actually helping the government surveil him.
Yeah,
he was actually like bugged the house or something.
Was he the one who said, or was it someone else who said, Andre told me he killed her?
That was him.
Yeah, that was him. That was him, right?
Yeah.
So he said, Andre told me he killed her, and he said he killed her because people who were like, mentally disabled essentially didn't have a right to live or needed to be cleansed. He thought of it
as a mercy killing sort of thing. Oh, that was the context.
That's so fucked up, man.
Yeah.
It's so messed up. I hate thinking about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that guy though. But that guy who, I mean, let's just assume everything he's saying is true. Andre tells him, I killed that girl. I did. And it was a mercy killing, right? Like he did it because he needs to cleanse the world essentially of like, people like this. Let's just say all that's true.
I think he said it was because they're suffering.
Or because they're suffering. Right? And the people in their lives don't truly love them or something.
Or something twisted like that.
Let's just say all that's true. All that guy told us is true. He himself still came to like a conclusion where he said he must have been demon possessed.
Yes.
So even though that guy had more knowledge than everyone else, he still came to a point of like, there must be a supernatural, almost urban legend type explanation to this, because the evil and the tragedy is so insurmountable. Like, it's so hard to comprehend because it's such a deeply evil act, right? And it's such a heinous crime that it's crazy that even the guy who, again, assuming that everything he said is true, the guy that Andre, admitted the crimes to, even he was like, there has to be a supernatural quality to this, because he just couldn't fathom the fact that another human being would do this. So he's like, he was probably possessed by something.
It seems
crazy.
easier to comprehend than
Isn't that crazy?
I think that I would want to believe that somebody's demon possessed instead of willingly wanting to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well,
it was a bit of a bleaker.
This was a depressing
episode.
This was not a spooky good time. This
was not a spooky good time.
This was
Sorry,
a
guys.
spooky unfun time. I did not like. I liked the documentary. I really respect the documentary. I like watching other documentaries, like I mentioned, on YouTube, or like the lore podcast, like Nexpo, like other. And truly, their documentary.
We should watch American Scream. Have you seen American Scream?
No. What's that?
It's a documentary about 3 families that make haunted houses in New England.
See, that's more fun.
Well, sorry.
That'll make me feel better than this did. Holy shit, man. I mean, this is a good movie to watch. I would recommend people watch this if you can handle the sort of true crime, real aspect to it. And the fact that it leaves you on this sort of really bitter note of...
It makes you think, is what I...
It does make you think.
Yeah.
It does make you think, because... It does make you think, because it makes you wonder just like about the things that we make up to cope with things versus like the fact and the reality of the situation. And if it's also interesting to think of, are the things that we, the supernatural, details, the things that we fill in the gaps with, are those fiction, or is it mixed with fact in a way where it's like impossible to separate the two? In the human mind, at least. I don't know about in reality. In reality, maybe there's no supernatural aspect to it, but in our minds, it's just interesting how we intertwine, urban legend and fact, and in a way where the two become inseparable. And then I don't know. This movie's just like a very interesting, it has an interesting thought and idea to share about that. And like, if we're essentially, to put it in simple terms, did this really happen, or are we coping in some way, right? Are we making shit up to cope? Essentially, there's the simplest, idea behind the film. Well, it's an interesting thought, though. So I think for that reason, it's worth a watch, even though I don't think I'll ever watch this again. It made me so sad. Yes. I don't think I'll ever watch it again.
It's a bit of a downer.
Yeah.
But it's a interesting premise.
Yeah, and I just have all the respect for the victims' families, and for the victims themselves. I pray for them. I give my love to the victims and their families, because it's like, at the end of the day, even though we have all these, even though Cropsey's like, an interesting story and an interesting vehicle to talk about, the blending of urban legend and fact and reality. At the end of the day, the victims were real.
Life
that was real.
Behind
that was real. Regardless of the things that we speculate about or the things that we might make up to cope with the tragedy, there was real life tragedy. Those victims existed. They were people, and their families still exist. And I just send my love and prayers to them, and I hope that they can find more closure in the future. I don't know if since this film they found out more information. I hope they have. I'll have to look that up, honestly. But I just, and for any family or any victim out there, I just like, I wish I could give them a hug.
Jacob
I feel so
needs
bad.
a hug.
I need to give them a hug. Like,
I think you need
to
a hug,
feel
buddy.
good. No, I want to give them a hug. Like, I feel bad. I feel so bad. So I just like, I hope they can find some sort of comfort or some sort of closure, with everything. So regardless if the urban legend aspect of Cropsey or anything, regardless if any of that is true or not, the tragedy is true. And for that reason, I just have the full amount of respect and love that I can possibly give to the victims and their families. So, yeah.
Well, with that somber note, thank you for joining us on Jake and Kyle's Spooky Good Time.
Not so
Next week will be a little
so
more
good.
fun.
Spooky, not so good.
Next week will be more fun. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jake.
We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. You need a tissue, buddy?